bit earlier than scheduled, but here we are. Should be decently balanced audio if it didn't fuck it up from last time I streamed.
Well, that would be a bit. Well.
So yeah, it's about time for comfy miniature painting. This time it is the Dark Souls of miniature painting.
I don't think this will be that hard.
I'm gonna try and make it not very difficult, but like, I've got 3 options set up for what I'm gonna paint. They're all from the Dark Souls board game.
Oh yeah, the gargoyles! I forgot those were from the basic set.
Yeah, it's one of the mini bosses. I've got 3 of the mini boss models here. We've got the Gargoyle, the Boreal Outrider, and the Winged Knight. Actually, let me set up a poll.
For me, it's the gargoyle. Cause fuck Outriders, seriously.
So I'm gonna leave it up to you, the viewers, to decide which of these 3
For
I'm gonna do start with. I might end up, like, when I need to wait with some of the stuff on one of these, I might work on the number 2 on the list, because that makes sense.
I mean, it's not digital painting where that everything dries quickly. Speaking of which, I need to set up my stream for that. Hold on.
Also, if anyone else wants to hang out and chat in voice, I am in the TG Discord server, TG Team Discord server, in one of the voice channels there. Feel free to hop in if you want to have a comfy chat while we go and paint in a bit. So I've already looked up some reference pictures for each of these as well. None of them are going to be particularly difficult to paint. I'm going to be using like the core basic techniques that let you get a decent result quickly, which is generally my style. Let me see for the focus. Yeah, I think I hold them up there pretty nicely in focus, so that's going to be working.
I really like the design of some of the monsters from Dark Souls. So the problem is, like, as the time went, the monsters got replaced with a lot of dudes in armor, and that's, I think, one of the biggest problems in the franchise.
I've also got some examples of already painted minis for the game. Well, I've only got like the boss tray with me. This is like the easiest miniature to paint of my life, basically. The Titanite Demon. Just like a very dark metal. It works.
I mean,
I've used some dry brushes and some washes, so.
In a game, it doesn't look all that dissimilar from just, oh, it's just a little bit of shine there and there.
Yeah, and on a similar trend, I've got this Fatso.
Oh.
Which was fairly straightforward as well, because it's basically just gold.
Well, yeah, I just remember the fight. Everyone remembers the fight. Especially when you're like, oh shit, I killed the wrong guy, won't get the armor of the guy I wanted.
And yeah, for the board game, I think it's decently entertaining. It's got some balance issues, but like, the big issues I've got with it is that if you're not up for it, it can be a bit repetitive if you have to die to like progress. And there's the it really does capture the flavor of the video, but that means that like as a team you need to be on point, knowing what you're doing, because if you fuck up, you can pay pretty dearly for it. And if any character goes down and it's a co-op game, the whole party gets reset to the bonfire and all the encounters leading up to the up to where you got reset. And you can
Sounds
only go
a
back
lit-
to the you can only go back to the bonfire a limited amount of times as well to limit playtime.
Sounds a lot like Kingdom Death Monster without the camp building.
Yeah, it's more straightforward than Kingdom Death and the like. Minis are decent quality. It's still board game-ish plastic, but
Isn't the issue that they're in a very weird scale, unlike any other?
not really. Dark Souls itself is kind of like the player characters are actually like a reasonable 28mm scale. And this is a board game you can also play it solo, and it auto balances itself roughly because every time one character acts, then all the enemies act. The big thing is that enemies have like different behavior patterns, and some of them just go for like the nearest target, but others go for like the person who had the most recent turn because that's the person who has aggro. And like regular enemies just have a pretty fixed pattern, but bosses have like they have a set of like 5 or 6 like attack cards, and you shuffle them and you draw 4 of them, and you don't know at the start which ones you get and in which order for that boss encounter. So that's also adds replayability. And then after you deal a certain amount of damage to a boss, those 4 cards are shuffled together, and randomly one of typically 3 like extra powerful moves is shuffled in there with them as well. So they've got like the enrage and reset of pattern.
Sounds really a little bit like Kingdom Death Monster, just a little bit different.
And also, what I do like also is that like the enemy stats are all static. Like to avoid an enemy attack, you need to roll dice based on your defense stat, or your evasion stat, if you want to dodge instead of block. If you're a little bitch. And on the other hand, if you are attacking an enemy, you roll attack dice against a static defense. So it's always player agency and no one has to roll for the enemies. Minis are pretty nice too. Biggest issue I have with the game is that the Kickstarter delivery has been a bit slow. I'm still waiting for a bunch of my stretch goals, including the armor set minis and the extra player character minis. Because at the moment, like, all the player characters in the core box are melee focused. You've got like I think it's like Knight, Fighter, Herald, and Assassin. But you do get spells and like magic focused equipment in the like deck of loot. Which is like, the deck it's a bit random what you get from the deck of loot, and that can hinder you. Because items have stat requirements and you need to spend souls to get your stats to that level. And the different classes need to spend different amounts of souls to get certain stats to certain levels. Yeah, the Kickstarter was still a pretty good deal. Like, what I'm still waiting for is like the armor sets, so that's just a bunch of 28mm models of like the iconic armor sets of Dark Souls, like Katarina and shit. There's also the like extra PC, so that gets you like Sorcerer, Pyromancer, Deprived. Oh yeah, there's also an Invader set, I think. And like an Iron Keep expansion.
Oh.
Which I think also includes Crystal Lizards for some reason.
That's a little bit weird.
They just added them in there, I think.
Fair enough. I would really die for some of the Demon Souls bosses and stuff in the board game, but I don't think there will be such a cross.
Yeah, I'm not sure entirely how to do things. Yeah, we're still in a 3-way tie for what we're gonna paint.
Vote for Gargoyle, I'll kill your family. Speaking of which, like, a lot of people are praising the Sekiro.
Sekiro?
Sekiro, fucking Christ. See, this is why I said go to bed. Like, this is too early. This is too early for me. People are actually saying a lot of good stuff about Sekiro, but at the same time, it plays like a weird Neo and Dark Souls hybrid. So people are kind of like not really used to what to expect.
It's apparently quite different from Dark Souls, from what I've heard.
Oh, very different.
Like, it has some similar feel things, but very different in certain things as well.
Which is always a good thing.
It's a very weep, but like in the historical Japan sense, from what I've heard.
Then it's not very weep. Do you really expect any weep to know Japan beyond like anime?
They're not weeps anymore at that point.
Yeah,
although
basically.
It's like late Warring States period, so that does.
Yeah, it's late Sengoku from what I've heard, that because they really wanted. They started when they started developing, they wanted to make the game about samurai, and they were like, well, samurai are kind of like ground fighters, and they have really strict tool set. So they went, let's make it about ninjas. That's always a good thing because there's no set tool set for a ninja.
Yeah.
Although people are complaining about one thing, and I can say I can see why, and it's replayability, mostly because the skill tree is you max it out and then
not a lot of build variety, basically.
Yeah, well, which is okay. Ninjas with no stealth that cred the shit out of each other with anime powers every time.
Also, it looks like you got your wish. Someone else voted Gargoyle.
Your family will be spared this time. I'm pretty sure some shooter will come in and like vote outright or Winged Knight.
Well, we're starting the Gargoyle now, at least. The designer for the other one would work for like. If we need to wait on stuff to dry with the Gargoyle, we can do that.
Yeah.
Let's grab some chocolate brown paint.
If I recall correctly, like this Gargoyle skin is this weird mixture of brown and pukish green.
It's mostly brown, but the armor is like greenish, dirty.
Yeah, it's
At least in the pics I found of it.
It's like copper that got corroded due to old age. It's like one of those Baroque church.
Yeah, I've linked.
Yeah.
What I found there.
It's.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab that. Oop. We're just gonna start with a very rough dry brush that's like barely any black remaining areas. What we do with this is we like not just define the text, make paint it brown, but also like help define the texture in that way. And I use a lot of dry brushes in my painting because it's.
Yeah, I noticed that.
It's a nice and fast way. Like I often use it also for like what you call pre-shading, where you that helps define the texture. Even if you're going to paint it a different color later, if you use thin layers for that different color later, you've already got like the light dark of the model's relief accented a bit. So for this, it's like I'm using an old disposable brush. It's like 6 of these for €1. So pretty quick.
I mean, in every guide, there's written like, if you want to do dry brushes, just pick the shittiest brushes available and use them, because
or a very stiff one, but yeah,
straight. Yeah.
Dry brushes wreck your brush. As you could kind of tell, we're gonna do several dry brushes on this mini with progressively lighter shades.
Oh, so the next one will be a Winged Knight. It seems we're on another draw, but
yeah, Outrider seems to have lost the favor for now.
Well, Outrider is kind of like as a miniature, is kind of like won't be outstanding because Outriders just look cool because all of the chill, I would say, effects.
All the frost effects and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, technically, there is a way to do it in a miniature, but it doesn't really look that good. It's some people use like cotton, like really thin one, but it has to be done correctly.
I've got one mini here that I don't look forward to figuring out how I actually want to paint it. That's this one. Because that fucking cloak is supposed to be translucent. Probably just gonna do it in like a very pale blue or something, but...
Oh yeah, the Dance of the Boreal Valley, one of the worst fights.
Haven't played Dark Souls 3 myself, so...
It's a Dark Souls game that basically is not a Dark Souls game mechanics wise. It borrows if you played Bloodborne before, you're more prepared to it than if you play Dark Souls 2. That's the problem. Like my friend who was playing Bloodborne that jumped into Dark Souls 3 had no problem because a lot of mechanics were similar. For me, who basically went Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, I had a very hard time.
Actually gonna move my keyboard out of the way a bit so I can get in a bit more of a comfortable pose with my arm. For this,
also, my biggest problem with Dark Souls 3, it felt like it was more of a Dark Souls greatest hits album than its own thing. It's like, do you remember this or do you remember that? Instead of trying to be its own thing, which is sad. But a lot of people liked it because it was throwbacks to like things they liked from the other games. So to each to their own. Well.
Yeah, they went for a different market segment than you were in.
I mean, it's good with Secure. They actually tried to do something different because that's.
Don't want to like make the same game 15 times. Hello, Todd.
To be honest, each Elder Scrolls game is different because the engine gets more bogged down and they have to remove more features to actually get something in there. From what I've heard, basically the reason why Skyrim is so limited is because they quickly reached the script limit for the entire game, and they basically had to rely on a smaller world with less NPCs, but with a little more dialogue choices and really shitty quests because they couldn't really program anything complex due to just training the engine. That's why Fallout 4 is just like almost no quests at all because, well, there is no room for that.
They just couldn't fit it in.
No.
Which is honestly a
from-
shitty design decision, but
well, yeah, if you're still using engine from Dark Age of Camelot as your base, you're going to run into some problems.
especially if you don't have a comprehensive upgrade.
From what I've heard, the main problem is basically everyone at this, like the senior designers at the studio, said that they don't want to relearn toolset for a new engine, and they don't want to make a toolset like to make mods for a new engine, and that's what bogs everything down.
Yeah, meantime, as you can see here with the painting, it's just like fairly basic so far. I tried to go like body part per body part, so I can. Oh. See that stuff? And even for like the blade's going to be repainted in a different color entirely. It's going to be metal, but
It's gonna be a little hard to get that metallic green, the corroded copper.
I actually have like a verdigris tint paint.
Ah. Potato, that's what, from what I've, like, there are like, there were several threads on V that, like, people were claiming to be, like, people working at Bethesda that they're trying to do Starfield, but it doesn't work in their stupid engine, and they've went back and forth on Starfield several times, and they still are basically battling with finding an engine that could support it, because just the opposition for it is humongous. Supposedly, Fallout 76 was just a move for Todd to get like more people in on the team, because the people at ZeniMax didn't really want any more additions to Bethesda. It's corporate politics, basically, and I can see that, because Fallout 76, from what I've heard, was basically hastily put together from an abandoned multiplayer mode for Fallout 4.
You could tell from what you saw of it on launch.
Oh yeah.
You could tell there was no heart in it in terms of like making it.
Well, if this was basically to yell at corporate, hey, give us like 50 more workers for our team, so I can just assign them to Starfield and produce this kind of garbage. I'm pretty sure that when the corporates heard loot boxes and microtransactions, they were like, yeah, let's do that. I mean, if game development is governed by basically a man in boardroom, there's going to be some problems. So,
unless those men in the boardrooms are actually from the video game industry to start with.
Well, yeah, but like you still have people like Tim Sweeney, who is more interested in policing the Chinese than actually like making a good game.
Yeah.
I mean, like, cancel every game, milk Fortnite until it's dead. And then deal with Chinese to basically buy off everything released on Steam. But yeah. So, I'm actually surprised that in Dark Souls 3 there was technically no gargoyle boss, because that was a staple of every Dark Souls game. There were gargoyles as like enemies, but no gargoyle boss. Valve makes games. It's just that the games they make are for VR now. because they so invested in that technology, they want some diminishing returns on that. So they've made at least, I think, 3 games for that.
Well, it might actually catch on with this generation of VR tech.
Well, from what I've heard, the knuckle controller they've made is miles better at controlling VR than any other controller. It's just that it has some quirks, and they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's the kind of tech development that should actually be pretty
Takes
interesting
time.
to see.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be super dedicated to pursue VR tech, because I mean, a lot of people here are like, all honestly, at least to me children, they don't remember like in the 90s when VR tech was starting, and just like there were helmets, there were controllers. The controllers were inaccurate as hell because they were like really
Pure gyro.
pure gyro, and it was a shitty gyro, so there was no compensation for like slight tilting.
I've seen how badly a robot self-navigates with just the odometric data from its engines. It's ugh.
Yeah.
Gyros back then were less accurate than that.
Oh god. And on top of that, the VR helmets were okay-ish. I mean, they were bulky. You had to basically have them attached to the ceiling for them to work properly. And the ones that were commercially available to the public, I think they were like about $1,000 a pop.
Yeah, it's only for those trying to be hip people. The early adopters.
I think the cheapest one was eyeglasses at about 400 Deutschmark, and they were okay-ish, but not really offered much. And the best one was VFX1, and that was about $1,000, $1,200 on release, if I recall correct. So yeah, prices, and this was like the 90s. $1,200, so that's adjusted for inflation, add about 30% on top of that. So yeah, a fair bit of amount of money.
But we're mostly done with the first layer of dry brushing now. Just and you could just see like this is gray plastic mini. This spray base got a bit black before we got started on this. It's like, for basic technique stuff, dry brushing, especially for bigger minis like this, it's your friend.
Well, unless you're painting tanks, then just use an airbrush, please.
It depends on what skill tank.
I'm talking about Warhammer.
Yeah, for most of that stuff, airbrushes are preferred, at least for like the overall color block things, and that uses a hand brush to like do in panel lines or fine edge highlights.
I mean, when I used to paint tanks, I usually did the first color layer with airbrushing, and then just the camo I've done with regular paintbrush.
Yeah, most of my tank painting has been 15mm, so 1/100 scale. So now the tank is about yay big, so that's...
No. On 1/72 tank painting, you don't have to use an airbrush, you just need to do proper paintbrushing. On 1/35 to 32, that's where the airbrush is your friend. Just
for like some scale comparison for 15mm, actually just grab something. For example, well, let's grab 3 things because just showing a tiny tank is probably not for skill stuff. It also might help showing the skill of these minis. Like, okay, here's a random 28mm sized humanoid infantry. It's an Eldar Guardian, yeah, implying space elves.
I mean, at least you're not playing Tau.
Yeah. Then for like 15mm scale, this is a 15mm or 1/100 scale tank. As you might be able to tell with the commander, it is a World War II Japanese tank, a Type 89. So it's kind of, well, not the biggest out there. Kind of chunky, nicely riveted, and yes, the commander wants his crew to drive forward.
Well, Japanese tank tactics were not really the best.
Yeah, for other comparison, here it is next to a Tiger. Tiger 1, that is. Then I have painted Tiger 2 sitting here, so they have a bit of a size comparison. And yeah, the Gargoyle is pretty chunky boy. Not absolutely massive, but like of suitable size. Let's see. Yeah, that's dry enough now. So let's get a lighter brown. So I'm gonna probably do 3 stages of dry brushing on this mini. The second and third stages are going to be a lot quicker than this first stage. And then I'm going to paint the armor in like a dark metal color. Probably do an overall wash to shade it down. And then I'm going to go add the verdigris effects, and that should already have it look pretty decent.
I somehow felt like the gargoyles didn't look that meaty, but I was wrong.
I like the wings and the tail. That's a thing that like looks a bit different. And they didn't have like exact video proportions for these minis, but also because the proportions sometimes change from game to game, so they have to like in line with which games do they want it.
Yeah, especially on Ornstein. That changed so many times. He went from like big to like reasonably sized to kind of like almost a normal dude in 3, I believe. So there's a lot of problems with just the people in charge of Dark Souls forgetting how proportions work.
Yeah, for the board game, he's like I think about like 2/3 taller than a regular dude. Like almost 2 dudes tall, but not quite.
Yeah.
Which actually is a pretty reasonable size. It works, and it's roughly how he was in Dark Souls 1, from what I remember.
I think in Dark Souls 1 he was 2 dudes tall. Sorry. When I'm usually painting, I am thinking how many heads something.
Yeah, that's like the classic drawing proportion thing, right?
Yeah. It's 7 to 8 is generally considered the standard.
And then you've got like, for example, like the SD Gundam stuff that's like 2 head proportion.
Yeah, but it's I usually go into like the Western scale, which is above 8 you have 9 I think is heroic, and 8 and 10 is Olympian. Potato, fuck you.
You could have seen that one coming.
Yeah, I could have seen that one coming, but I actually am trying to proportion these dudes in armor. since actually I am doing a Dark Souls inspired piece for a friend of mine.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. As some of you viewers might be able to see, for this dry brushing, like for example for this weapon here, I don't dry brush all the way around. I just dry brush from the angle where the light is likely to fall from, which is from above but not perfectly above in this case. So even though like a lot of this precision is going to be hidden by the metallic paint that's going to be out there, it does mean that thin coats of metallic is going to like allow it to shine through a bit.
Actually, speaking of like Dark Souls in general, like I really do like the fact that a lot of Dark Souls armors are designed to be at least plausible in some cases. We're not going to talk about Katarina being entirely plausible, but in a lot of cases, the Dark Souls armor is actually designed to be somewhat plausible.
Fancy, which is a good but plausible.
Yeah, but that's the problem with a lot of fantasy games. They're really on the implausible factor.
Yeah.
Looking at you, World of Warcraft.
Yeah, they're like the classic example of horribly over-designed.
Horribly over-designed, horribly overpowered.
Well, I've also played like War Machine / Horde as a miniature game. There you also have a certain character.
Oh God,
Vlad.
Yeah, yeah.
Captain No Peripheral Vision.
Warhammer Hordes, I think, is pretty infamous for that.
Also for having actually pretty damn mediocre quality minis for which they ask GW or above prices.
They didn't back in the day.
They do these days.
Yeah.
There's a reason that game system is basically dying.
Well, it had a surge of popularity where Games Workshop was just too darn expensive, and now it's just completely flipped around, and Warhammer Hordes is just.
They mismanaged their 3rd edition horribly.
They also mismanaged one thing. I believe that if the commander is killed, you basically lose the game. So like.
Well, that's core part of like the game idea.
Yeah, but it's the problem with that core idea is just stack a lot of units that can harm the main guy and just concentrate on him.
Well, actually, that's more difficult than you'd think. Because you can body block quite easily.
I think there were like a friend of mine showed me a build that he made that is basically driven towards that, but that could have been like an edition ago or something.
Well, I've played it for a chunk of 1st edition, which was a horribly imbalanced mess, where basically every faction had some horrifically broken shit. And even then there were 1 or 2 units that they had to nerf because they were horrifically broken compared to the other horrifically broken shit. And then the 2nd edition was pretty reasonable at that kind of stuff. There were some like combo setups that could get you a decent likelihood of a Warcaster kill if they're fairly close towards you. But they generally had counters and bad matchups against certain lists. And in tournaments you typically have like, you bring 2 army lists, and when you get paired with your opponent, you can look at both of the lists your opponent has, and then basically you blind pick which of your 2 lists you're going to be using against that. Well, blind pick. You can pick which of the 2 you're going to use, and you reveal them at the same time, basically. So that worked reasonably well for that. You can bring like, oh, my main list is going to run well against most opponents, and like this and this faction they're shit against, so I'm bringing another list that works well against that. Problem there is that also means you need to buy, build, and paint 2 armies for tournament play.
Yeah, but with Warhammer Hordes it's not really an issue. It's like not what.
It wasn't. They have knight-sized miniatures as well, and they're fairly common these days. So they kept increasing the army size. That's one of the big issues.
Oh god, so basically it's the same creep like with Warhammer Fantasy.
Not like unit sizes, but like big units. Like Colossals, which are literally about the size of a... Yeah, about the size of like the medium-sized Imperial Knights for 40k.
Dear lord, why?
But some lists run 2 of those fucks.
Like... I guess that is the problem of every miniature game. To keep the game selling, you have to like come up with the next big thing, and it's just a creep.
Yeah, that can be an issue.
I mean, that's what eventually killed Warhammer Fantasy. Just
it's unit size creep and just unsustainable community model.
I really wish they would like someone would just go back to the old D&D battle system and actually because the whole problem I've noticed is like the old battle system books I have from when they got released. This was like first edition stuff.
And yes, this is Saul showing his old faggotry.
And then I have a fucking like library of old D&D books. I love those. I don't have all of the blue books yet. I have all of the green ones and the brown ones. And whoever collects the D&D books knows, or rather AD&D books knows which one I'm talking about. It's the complete handbooks. And I still recommend people getting the World Builder's Guidebook. I mean, that's not really tied to any edition, but
it's not mechanical.
It's a great tool. It's one of the best things around because it will tell you everything, how to design a world. If you're just starting out. It has everything to tell you about how to make a world, how to design religions, interactions, magic levels,
all that stuff that's like really complicated to figure out in a way that makes sense if you're just trying something like that for the first time.
Yeah, it even has like how to form mountain ranges, and this is good stuff for a beginner DM. Or even like a middle tier DM that said, "Okay, we're done with Forgotten Realms. I'm gonna do my own thing."
There's plenty of those people around.
Yeah, there's fucking plenty. The other book I recommend is the complete book of villains. That's the blue book, and it's amazing. It's not mechanical. None of that stuff is mechanical. It's just how to design great villains for every occasion, for every alignment. Like how to design a lawful good villain. Like a lot of people don't understand like alignments in D&D are all can be bad.
Yeah, it's not justice. Modern era D&D, so like present day setting.
Second edition is the best edition.
I'd maybe just go not D&D in that case.
I would suggest not going D&D.
It's for what setting what kind of rule set you'd use would depend heavily on what kind of story are you trying to tell.
If you want like something for like a modern setting, I cannot stress to recommend Alternity. There's a second edition of Alternity going on right now. The Kickstarter was founded successfully. I did not donate because I have all of the old books, so I'm just going to use those instead. But Alternity is really good for not being GURPS and being like something for a modern era that has like cyborgs, hacking, starships. It's imagine all of the 90s sci-fi series like Stargate, sliders, X files, etc., mashed together to form a system that's going to be Alternity. That's for running all of those scenarios. Never use D20 Modern. D20 Modern is trash. And,
if you want something very narrative focused and your group can handle it, I might recommend Fate, which is a free rule set, but you really need to have a group that can work with Fate's style of mechanics.
I have a group that
just not working.
I have a group that actually works well with Fate, and it's a blast. But a lot of stuff is relies heavily on the characters wanting to not succeed sometimes.
Yeah, not succeeding to make things more interesting.
Yeah.
Have things go bad now so you can do extra cool things later.
Yeah.
Because it would make the story more interesting. You need to have that kind of mindset for Fate. And yeah, we're going.
I would say that's a mindset you have to have for any kind of game, especially Call of Cthulhu. Because everything will go wrong in Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, well, there are certain games like the classic like Power Fantasy Dungeon Romp D&D thing that a lot of people start off with.
Well, I don't want to talk about Greyhawk. It's kind of a topic that is so overdone. It has become like a blight on role-playing games that equated role-playing games with the dungeon crawl, and I don't really like that. I mean, the new wave was trying to basically shift away from that in the early 2000s, but that didn't really work out. And now we thanks to to MMOs, we came back to like a role-playing game is basically a dungeon crawl board game, and Wizard of the Coast is heavily trying to sell that.
Yeah. Oh, it depends heavily on like your group, but like for appealing to video gamers, it makes sense that you go like, oh, it's like this, but
yeah, but it really does.
If you keeping players stuck in that mindset, that's what's harmful.
Yes, that's
not harmful, but things could be so much more interesting.
I think the biggest problem here is also the video games are not really trying. The ones that are going for the narrative are usually stuck with a very basic fantasy world, so you will get something like Pillars of Eternity or Tyranny that does not stray away from just the basic stuff. And on the other hand, all of the the dungeon crawl with wacky races and everything usually say fuck any amount of world building, this is just a dungeon crawl. My best example would be Legend of Grimrock, because you have like all of this like weird races, and that's and some kind of a real hint of the world existing beyond the Isle, but overall is just like backdrop for a simple dungeon crawler. Which ultimately the problem is we don't really have something that is trying to go beyond the simple mix, except maybe the Divinity Original Sin.
Meanwhile, we're making decent progress on this third stage drivers, for which I went with like I took the lighter brown I had and I mixed in a sand color of about 50-50.
Yeah, that looks for the par when it comes to that bleached out rotten skin of the gargoyle.
I'm actually thinking of maybe adding like the sand color by itself for a final like drivers thing, because I'm gonna be adding a brown wash later.
Are you going to do some highlights on that skin? Because in the reference pictures he has those spots of more bleach white skin. Yes, Alguin, that's Dark Souls gargoyle.
Yeah, it's from the Dark Souls board game. I've got a couple more, like, I've got the Winged Knight here, got the Outrider here, and, well, might as well just grab it into shot. 2 painted minis, although with the Titanite Demon you can barely tell, and a Dancer. It's all from the Dark Souls board game. I'm going with some fairly basic stuff so far for this mini, but I'm not going to go for like horribly complicated stuff either. It's just because
I mean, Gargoyle in general has a very simple color scheme.
A lot of the Dark Souls stuff has, to be fair.
Yeah.
Something I've seen, like, it's very dark and muted generally, but dry brushes and washes can help with that.
I think overall what because this is coming from my actually like a guy that looked at the model. What Dark Souls models are extremely basic. A ton of like stuff for it is done with normal maps and speculators. If you ever want to like draw Dark Souls armor, look at it in the game, because then you will get the most out of it.
You want to really make the lighting speak in the texture, right?
Yes. Like the whole thing is the engine of Dark Souls is made for that. If you try to look at the same thing in Source Filmmaker, it looks slightly off. If you look at it in the model viewers, the models look absolutely dreadful in like Blender or anything like that, because you're missing that specific
the stuff that makes them pop.
Yeah, the whole thing is also the color palette of Dark Souls is very specific. It has a lot of oranges, it has a lot of browns, but it's working towards a melancholic kind of mood set. So if you're trying to draw like Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 1 kind of like shifts more into the blues, because it's kind of like a dark fantasy world. Dark Souls 2 moves into the oranges, and Dark Souls 3, I'm afraid to say it, but it's all over the place, and that's kind of shitty, because you need to like have the same mood set for the entire game for it to work. But if you're trying to draw Dark Souls armor, remember the mood set. A lot of people have the same problem with like drawing stalker pictures. It's like they're not using colors muted enough, because everything in Ukraine is always rainy and always foggy, so you need to mute your colors a fair bit.
And the videos, they often use the filters for that.
They do, but in the original Stalker, I think they've just used
design everything to be muted from the start.
Yeah, because if you look at textures for some of these monsters, they favor like muted browns and muted greens. Like this, of course, like if you're painting miniatures, is kind of like very hard to capture. I've seen like a lot of people like can paint the miniatures really well, but then take a photo in a bad light and it looks all over the place.
Yeah, I know. Like bad lighting for pictures of my minis is. It happens a lot. I don't have like a good like photo booth setup or anything. And yeah, well, this, what you can see, it's just dry brushing shit, so it's quite straightforward. You just need to make sure that I don't have too much paint on my brush. As you can tell, things are getting a lot brighter, but still quite muted in terms of color here. which is the idea, of course. What I'm going for here is now a bit brighter than I want for the final result, which is why I'm thinking of adding that final like light dry brush with like proper like bone or sand color on certain areas to make it pop a bit more, because it's gonna get muted down again, because when I'm gonna be using overall washes on it, pretty much all of the model, to bring it back down again. Maybe add some like greenish washes on a couple of places to like have some different places on the skin have like slightly different color tones, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's see. Actually, take it away from there for a second. Move it into some daylight, because I'm sitting next to a window here. Yeah,
Surprisingly,
how dark I want to have it.
I mean, surprisingly, natural light is probably one of the best lights to work in.
It's fairly neutral in terms of color, a bit on the yellow side, maybe, but like the light I've got currently is a bit more yellow than natural light, so.
Surprisingly enough, like we've recently looked at why the hell natural like the white LED light is so unnatural and so bad. Apparently, it misses a lot of the red color spectrum because of how the luminophores are formed inside of them. So, despite it being like in the range of like white light, it still misses a good chunk of the red spectrum, and it feels so unnatural because we're so used to light with a lot of infrared.
Makes it feel cold even though it doesn't look cold, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, let's see. Very light dry brush. And I'm putting it a bit on the tip of my finger. And if I can see the paint's only at the raised parts of my fingerprint, that's when I know I've got like little enough on this brush that I can actually and I'm only going to do this on like some of the more raised areas to make them a bit lighter. Like a lot of that armor stuff, I put some on there, but it doesn't matter that much because I'll be painting the armor in a bit.
Returning a little bit to the DM quality topic, I generally noticed like how Pathfinder and 5th edition has become such a like big thing for like a lot of people that want to get in, that they really have a hard time to wedge themselves out of it and try something else.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like a marketing strategy. If like everyone is playing it, well, that means that we'll like sell modules and get more people in that way. But at the same time, it's kind of like for role-playing games, it's kind of damaging to them as a whole, because it's the companies are trying so hard to make it like into a board game and a board game only for accessibility.
I'd say it depends.
Well, it really depends, but like I don't know, like I feel like the general sentiment right now is get everyone playing, which is I kind of I don't really like that attitude. We used to have like stuff like Hero Quest, which was perfect for like a board game session, and all of the advanced stuff was the book stuff. So I'll be right back.
Yep. As we can see, we're making some nice progress on the dry brushing here. And with each step of dry brushing, you can tell that there's the texture is popping a lot more, and we're going for something here now that needs to be like a bit more exaggerated than you'd want in the final result, because, as I said, we're gonna like bring things back down again in a bit in terms of color. So yeah, I think we've pretty much got this. We're gonna get a bit more dry brushing on the like claws on that hand, on the top of the hand here in general. Quite like, for example, like the texture on the shield here. It's like quite nice, works really nicely with like dry brushing washing techniques. Yeah, now that we've got the dry brushing stage out of the way, clean this brush. It's also a reminder, if you want to just like chat log in voice, you can hop onto the TG Cup server and hop into the voice channel where I am, and chat that way if you're happy with your voice being broadcast on stream. Yeah, let's see, which brush am I gonna need for this? I'll just grab this one. So next up is going to be the metals. And metals on this thing are kind of muted. Like pretty much everything, because Dark Souls color palette. We're going to be using a fairly dark metal. I use mostly Vallejo, but I still use some Games Workshop Citadel paint as well. So in this case, Citadel Lead Belcher, which is a kind of a dark metal. I'm actually just going to rotate this around a bit. So I'm going to be thinning this paint a bit. With the other stuff, it's mostly just like I've got my brush wet and that thins it enough. With dry brushes, you don't want it too thin either. With this, I want a solid bit of water in there. So let's see. What are we going to start with? I'll just start with the head armor. As you can tell here, we don't exactly like entirely fill in the armor. We can leave the paint a bit thin so that the dry brushing we've done shows through. Makes the armor look a bit more faded as well. I'm not trying to go for like award-winning quality or anything here. I'm going for like basic tabletop standard, which is what I generally go for, also because it means I can actually like complete minis in a reasonable time frame. Because I've got a backlog. Oh god, I've got a backlog. Advantage of having a massive backlog is I can just pick whatever I feel like painting generally and like.
I mean, I shouldn't be the one doing the talking here, but I have about, that's going to be 200 unfinished paintings. Some of them paid for. Eventually. They're paying for quality, not for speed.
Not as long as they knew that when they agreed.
No, I fucking have that in my terms of service. Like,
Done when it's done.
when it's, I only had like 3 complaints about the speed, because every time it's like, oh fuck, it was worth the wait because the quality is actually good for like $50. I just like have this this humongous problem of just trying to like of do everything perfect to the fact that to the point that like people say, okay, it's time to stop. This is looking good. I'm like, no, doesn't look good to me.
Perfectionism.
It's horrible.
I know that feeling. I have it when writing texts.
Oh god, that's even worse.
Yeah, for my master's thesis, that was a bit of an annoyance.
Yeah, and you say that for the master thesis. I'm fucking doing a doctorate, and I'm like, I want to chuck this thing out of the window right now.
The nice thing with the Dark Souls sound having a lot of texture, like which is not on like the 3D model, but you use normal maps, but they did do it as texture on these models, and that means that these techniques like dry brushing and washing, they make that stuff pop. That also means that this kind of miniature is actually relatively straightforward to have it look good, even if you're a pretty basic painter. Which is nice, because there are some models that are just like, you can make them look fucking amazing, but it's gonna take so much of an effort, and so many advanced techniques. And that's one of like the most demotivating things you can have happen if you're a beginning painter. While on the other hand, like, miniatures that make it easy to make things look good, that's like, you want that when you're starting out painting.
That's why confrontation miniatures were really good. And then the company died because, you know, selling really nicely sculptured miniatures for like those prices is not going to be a good model for a company to drive.
Yeah, I kinda end up missing basically all of confrontation.
Well, Raka miniatures like had like this superb quality to them. Like, actually, let me get some and post in chat, because like sculpt, it like all of them look dynamic in the time where you would get
the static flat cast pose from Two Piece Mold.
yeah. Get this one. Well, also they were not really that easy to paint because they're all metal.
That
and
was
not easy to assemble.
Oh yes. If you want metals that are not easy to assemble, older Infinity sculpts are horrible about that as well.
I don't like Infinity, so I don't have that problem.
It's like, oh, I've got these Japanese biker units, and like the footrest for one of the feet on the biker is a separate bit on both ends. One of the like handles, including brake grip, is a separate bit. The antennae on helmets are often separate bits. In newer kits, they're not quite as bad about that, but there's still a level of fiddliness to it.
Let's see if we can grab this. Yeah. We're kind of talking about like this quality of miniatures when it comes to Rackham. Like, if you look at it, it's like
nice pose, lots of details, not horribly over-designed.
I actually had this one. And like again, like good dynamic pose, lots of details, but again, like this cost as much as like a command group for Warhammer back in the day. So and you needed like what, 10 miniatures to start playing confrontation. I mean 10 miniatures on each for both sides, because it was basically something more akin to Warhammer Quest than any bigger battle. So yeah, you it's just like you had a good game, you had a good like sculptures. The problem is that's not really a model for a starting company that will sell. A darn shame, but apparently there's a revival of confrontation right now, and some company got the rights, and they all have all of the old sculpts, and they're still producing miniatures.
Yeah, I heard something about that recently.
Yeah, and the best bit is all of those miniatures still hold up when it comes to style, and that's a testament to, like, on how good those sculpts are, that in 19 years it still holds up.
Yeah, there's not a lot of miniatures that do well. Like, some of my favorite sculpts out there are like the old, like, Lord of the Rings sculpts for GW by the Perry brothers. There's some really great ones in that.
Yeah, I was going to say the GW like Lord of the Rings ones are quite possibly one of the ones that stood the test of times.
Helps that like they were closely supervised by New Line, who designed with the Weta Workshop designs, and a large part of that range was sculpted by the Perry brothers, who are just legends of miniature sculpting. Even though one of them had to entirely relearn sculpting with his offhand after he lost his primary hand in an unfortunate reenacting accident.
Ow.
Yeah, they something went wrong when reloading a cannon.
Are we talking? Which era cannon are we talking?
Like Renaissance. It's like British Civil War things, like.
Okay, that's closer to Baroque, but ow. I don't know where this is going.
Yeah, apparently there was still unexploded powder in the barrel when he went in to clean it.
Ooh.
Yeah, lost his entire right hand. then learned to sculpt again with his left hand. You know what the first like production miniature was that he sculpted again? It's a Bretonnian one, the Green Knight.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, that was the first thing he sculpted after he like with his offhand, as his relearning thing. So as you can see, I'm going for a, not quite a dry brush, but sort of dry brush style, even with applying the paint on the metal here. I'm doing that specifically so like, it keeps like the shading intact a bit more. And it just makes it look a bit darker, a bit more weathered, which is the kind of look you gotta go for with Dark Souls miniatures most of the time.
Yeah. Everything has to look run down. It's a dying world after all. Oh yeah, interesting bit I recently came across is that apparently in I believe Aztec mythology there was since in, or was it Mayan? I don't. It was one of the you know.
One of the Central Americans,
yeah. Yeah. One of the gods, basically, since everything in those mythologies went in cycles, basically the sun died out, I believe, 3 times already. So, to rekindle the sun for the 4th or 5th time, one of the gods had to toss himself into a bonfire and become the new sun. And I'm like, wait a second, that actually sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Where did I see that? Oh, Miyazaki, you fucking hack. Yeah, but see, this is actually like for stuff like this. This is like for a DM. This is an important tool for like look if you want like to create something outlandish. Look into outlandish mythologies.
There's a lot of places you can steal good stuff from. Just don't lift it verbatim, but twist it in your own interesting way.
I actually have a book on the Nordic mythology that goes into detail, like of the lesser known mythos, and there's really some wild stuff that you can lift. I do recommend just like going to the library, scouting mythology books. There's a lot of good stuff you can lift from there. Going with the Judeo-Christian mythos is fairly good if you're having like a Japanese audience to play with, because for them it's so outlandish.
Make it foreign to make it interesting, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, from what I heard, was the reason why there's so many Christian symbolism in Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yeah, they didn't understand it either. It just looks cool.
Yeah, it just looks cool. Like.
That's still like the overriding directive for doing a lot of stuff in general, and like making your world wherever it is. In the end, you want to make it cool, interesting. That's also why a lot of like anime have gratuitous German.
Oh, yeah. Fucking Asuka with her holographic map. But a lot of German stuff, a lot of now that I think of it, like the Slavic mythologies are not really that explored except for the Witcher series, but that's because there has basically and this is actually a point that I've read in a book, is that the Slavic priests did not keep records. Like the whole thing why we have like a good description of what Celtic paganism was because Julius Caesar has written his commentary on the Gallic Wars and wrote everything he observed there.
Yeah,
And
that kind of stuff is. Records from an outside perspective are very interesting for that kind of stuff. You need to keep in mind, like, the perspective of the person writing.
But you have to like look at it in as a source in the source language. One of the I think the Dominican monks that was sent to Mexico has written a comprehensive guide on the Aztec culture in the 16th century, using all of the records that were rescued from the Aztecs, because I believe there was a huge debate because some of the priests wanted to burn them, and that guy actually said, no, we need to study them to root out the heresy. And then they're like, okay. So the guy basically translated all of it and kept it as a culture guide.
Mm-hmm. And that is a sensible decision also for a guy like him, because hey, you got to make sure you're not committing a horrible cultural faux pas.
Well,
and like
also,
being able to like create similes between your new faith and the faith you're trying to replace.
From what I've actually heard, that there was like the reason why a lot of like the Aztec and the Aztec bordering people converted so easily and created some sort of like syncretic religion is that the element of self-sacrifice of a god is present both in Christianity and their faith. So accepting Jesus Christ that died a horrible torture death was so easy to them as an idea.
Yeah, it makes sense with your already established cultural mythos. That helps.
Yeah. And
on the other hand, it's like, why the fuck would a guy even do that, and why would that even be considered good? It's
that was actually a problem, like converting some Asian cultures to or African cultures to like Christianity was. They couldn't understand the concept of sacrifice. They understood the concept of power, but not of a sacrifice. But yeah.
That kind of stuff is sometimes very interesting, how different cultures approach things, and like cultural tales, and what kind of connotations and what kind of like mindsets people work with. It's something people forget a lot of the time. Like, cultural mindsets are very much a thing.
So yeah, if you're actually designing like a world, consider actually like trying to at least do a little bit of a. I would say bring down a culture or a race down to the virtuous and work with that, and bullshit along the way like tales of heroes dead and dead, but just write down the names so you don't repeat something like a name. But overall, just try to bring down cultures like you defining virtuous and work with that.
That describe a culture from their stories and what they like, not from like a history.
Yeah, because it could be very misleading if for example like like a culture of I don't know, like Knolls have like this hero that was a trickster that managed to steal something from the gods. I mean as a widow. That means that for a tribe of Knolls who he's venerated as a hero, like you have to keep your items in check, because you know those guys will try to like keep something for themselves. But if other tribe like has some kind of a guy that basically killed a ton of enemies and sacrificed them to a god, well, yeah, watch out for those. Those are not going to be negotiating. And it's good like that, because that actually like gives the world like a more of a
lived in vibe.
Yeah, it's a living environment. A lot of modern RPGs see monsters as a sack of XP, and that's really bad, because it really brings in that mindset that oh, we see orcs on the road, we charge, we kill them, we get XP, we proceed always, and it entrenches this mindset that every fight will net them XP and loot, to the point that all they care about is XP and loot.
Mm-hmm. One simple thing in role-playing games that can help with that is to just, like, in terms of XP, don't award XP for fights and stuff, don't award XP at all. Just have, like, event-based level progression. Like, oh, you've cleared a significant part of the story arc. Now you're leveling up.
Yeah, we do it, like at least the groups I've played with. We basically did it at the end of the session. Like everyone, the DM would keep tally, and then basically based on the performance and based on how individuals performed, it was tallied up.
I mostly play with fixed groups, so in that case it's like, the group levels up at the same time together.
Mm-hmm.
But what they do is mostly like, have they overcome significant challenges and story progression since the last time they leveled up? Have they learned and become stronger story-wise?
I mean the fight
not necessarily stronger in like combat sense, but like have they grown? Are they more rich in experience?
Mm-hmm. Also, a good thing is go for the skill-based experience.
One more thing with the metals, and then the metals are basically done. This like cross thing on the base is getting a bit of metal work, because that's basically normal enemies don't have that, but like bosses and some elite enemies have arcs in Dark Souls the board game. So and depending on like some moves hit in certain arcs generally, and they also sometimes make the monsters vulnerable in certain arcs. So you roll more dice to damage if you attack them from their vulnerable arc. And you can exploit that with the patterns they act in, because once you know, like, oh, he's going to do that move, then that move, then that move. Oh, and the third move there is going to leave his left flank exposed. The move before that, he strikes to his left and then turns right. And it's like, you know the pattern, so you know, like, what you gotta do to exploit it. Which is a lot of what Dark Souls combat is also about.
So far, the model painting is really neat. Almost a shame that you will have to like add a little bit of that corrosion there and there.
I'm gonna do it in like a limited way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing for that actual like darker look is that green from the rusted copper. Although it's kind of weird because
it's like a metal color, not like a copper color for the armor, but it's got like a verdigris effect. It's like a bluish green thing.
Mm-hmm.
A bit more towards the greenish side on this. I might actually just go for some kind of green wash thing instead of like going for the bluish green thing. But first I think I'm gonna add like a brown wash over pretty much the entire model. Just to tie things together and darken it up a bit. Especially the metal. Let's see, where's my Agrixer shade? So yeah, we're grabbing the old standby. Well, the slightly less than entirely old standby, but still like the classic tool in Painter's Toolbox. Washes, specifically the Citadel washes, are just excellent.
Yeah, they're excellent. That's one of the reasons I actually use Citadel paint, because I actually like the range of Citadel paint gives.
Like, I mostly use Vallejo, but I use Citadel as well. It's like my local store stocks both, although they have a bigger range of Vallejo, but especially Citadel washes and stuff that's in stock. So yeah, for this wash, I'm not applying it too heavily because there's already quite a bit of shading in there. Both of you guys are like, draw things together again, make things a bit darker again. Yeah, washes are a beginning painter's friend, as long as you don't apply them too heavily. Because if you add too much of a wash, especially on flat areas, it's gonna pull. If you add too much, even on like curved areas, it can pull if you add too much. It might dry glossy or even like fade to white if you have way too much. It's like, especially if it's like relatively warm when you apply the wash. There are some like things you can seriously fuck up when applying washes. But if you apply them in moderation, they can help a lot in making things look good. Tying colors together, adding shading. Like for some miniatures, what I do is I paint base colors, then I do highlights, and then I wash. But for some models, I do base colors, wash, and then highlight. It also depends on like how much of a contrast you want. If you want like cartoony strong highlights, you do the wash first to get like a bit of shading in, and then do the highlight. But if you want more of a tied together look, you do the highlight before the wash. And you don't have to do like specifically one highlight. You can do multiple stages of highlighting, washing. You can even like combine it. Though I generally like to have a fairly limited palette. Like having 3 or 4 tones of color on one thing, carefully applied generally, it's a lot more straightforward than trying to like, oh, I'm gonna highlight in 5 stages. It can look really good, but it takes a lot of work. It's basically something for like competition painters and like. But again, it's also a matter of like, what kind of quality standards are you going for? In my case, it's generally tabletop quality.
I mean, yeah, but what kind of tabletop quality? It's like you have like so many standards in that, because you have your thin your paints quality. You have like your average. Oh, I actually use a painting guide, dude, and you have. Yeah, I'm actually good at this, and like I won a Golden Goblin award. So what now? So there are tiers of.
Yeah, typically what I consider typical quality is like, it's got shading and highlighting, and it's got a decent range of paints that work together, so it's not like a horrible mess of colors.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it looks good when you've got it like 2 feet away, and it still looks decent when you look up close.
Yeah, because like for the Golden Goblin, you do need to spend a lot of time working on the details, and on top of that, you need to spend a little bit of time working on the base, because you need to make things look good at the base as well.
Yeah, a nice base can really help all the work. For like for this Dark Souls stuff, it's a board game. You're keeping the bases blank because like it's what works better for the game, especially with the markings. But for a miniature war game, you want to do some kind of basing. Well, something I have seen which is cool, what some people do, is they have these transparent acrylic circles, and they just carefully super glue their miniature to those, so they have transparent bases.
That's a new one. I've never heard of that.
I've seen it been used a lot more in recent years. It can work really well if executed nicely. It means your minis will fit on whatever table you're playing on.
Mm-hmm.
Downside, of course, is that your minis are slightly hovering.
No, not a problem if you're a Chaos Sorcerer.
Yeah. But then the thing you're attached to that's kind of like off the ground is hovering. But yeah, it's like there's some downsides, especially if you have like sculpted on base elements on your miniature. But it can look quite nice if done well. One risk as well with that is that the frosting of super glue can be an issue on those acrylic bases. That's why it needs to be glued on carefully. Yeah, it's gonna be a bit more brown with this wash added onto the shield. And also got like those scratches on like the central area. Those are gonna pop out a bit more. And I'm gonna leave a bit more than would be basic on that central area. You can see there's like a bit of a poolish thing there. That's actually just going like, there's little enough of it, like to take off the worst of it, that it's going to like just make it look kind of smudged, which is actually a thing I'm going for here. Because I'm not going for a squeaky clean look here, because that does not work for most Dark Souls things.
Yeah, it has to have that rundown look to it. Like that's the thing with like if you ever like doing Dark Souls fan art, is like don't make it look pristine, like
not if it's serious, yeah.
Which is a lot of people don't understand. Like I'm going to bitch a little bit about people just throwing armor in general. Armor in general is not, unless it's parade armor, it's going to have bends, it's going to have cuts, it's going to have rust on it, a little bit on the edges. Never ever fucking draw armor looking like it's off a parade. A person that is wearing armor and is using it has armor in a, I wouldn't say dilapidated state, I would say slightly used state. If the armor is well maintained, then you know the bends will be there but hammered out, the cuts will be glossed over, but the armor will still be dirty from use, so it will never have a perfect shine to it. it has to look worn. Same with swords, same with other weapons. A person that is using them to make a living will never have them look like out of the shop.
Unless he's just literally walking out of the shop. Yeah. But that's not probably not something you'll do.
Even then.
Now, only the new items would be like new.
Yeah, fair enough, but still, like the whole thing is, if you're going for a fantasy setting, like we have the like diamond dust and stuff that actually polishes metal to a really nice shine. You don't really have that level of
right. Unless you have something like magical, like enchanted armor that's not indestructible, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But that does, if you don't do that only for the magical stuff, you also have a way to make things clearly look magical without going for the glowy bullshit stuff.
Never do glowy bullshit armor. I'm going to fucking kill your family.
Unless it something like a bit like the Tolkien style, like maybe some glowing runes, something if enemies are nearby or something. But don't go overboard on the object source lightning thingy and stuff. One of my favorite bits of Discworld is still Corporal Carrot's entirely non-magical sword. Which is actually so non-magical and ordinary that it's like... It's less magical than most of the world, which makes it incredibly real and incredibly sharp.
Given how Discworld works, I'm sure that's that's a very powerful item in Discworld.
Yeah. And it's in the hands of Carrot Ironfounderson, like the pretty much 7-foot tall dwarf. Well, he's legally a dwarf.
I miss Terry Pratchett's writing, although it like is in his last days he kind of
The newer books weren't quite as fun as some. Like the middle work is the best, I'd say.
It has it more like he got too involved in the whole like euthanasia stuff, which is, I mean, I'm not going to debate it, but I think he was more involved into like please let me die rather than writing books. I kind of understand him because like losing your mind like that for a person that's creative, that's the like a real horror.
And understanding that it's going on.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like you could feel that his interest was somewhere else when writing those books, and he just wrote them to like keep sustenance at this point. But yeah, in general, like Terry Pratchett's Discworld is a very interesting thing because it does combine that philosophical idea of basically like to make some like a concept come to life. All you have to do is conceptualize it.
And have enough people understand it. It's generally
I mean, we actually had
his daughter did help a lot with like the later books, from what I have read.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not full ghost writing, but like he couldn't do his full regular writing the way he used to, and you can tell in how it's written.
Mm-hmm.
He had to dictate stuff and everything. Like, And his daughter is a pretty solid writer, but she has a different style, and you can tell.
I mean, like, you know, it's at least it's not as jank as Frank Herbert and Frank Herbert's son.
Brian, please. Gah.
No, you're not your father's legacy, and your father's legacy is still kind of soiled after God Emperor of Dune. Man, who could be the real Messiah? Oh yeah, Duncan Idaho. Everyone loves Duncan Idaho.
And now I wonder how hard they're gonna fuck up that new Dune adaptation.
Oh my lord! Like, see, this is this is the part when I actually would. No.
I think maybe the bigger question is, which is going to suck harder? The new Middle Earth series or the new Dune adaptation?
The new Middle Earth series.
At least they're not going to cram it into like the places where the movies and books are already heavily in play.
It's oh god, this is coming from a TV guy. The Game of Thrones has had such a significant impact on a modern series like fantasy or sci-fi series that everything has to adhere to that certain grittiness and
yeah, it's probably not going to have the Middle Earth vibe.
No, it's not, because
it needs to feel Tolkien-esque, and I'm in doubt that they're going to be able to pull that off.
That's what I fucking hate about Expanse, which is like people are trying to sell it to me. Oh, it's the new sci-fi series. It's like, okay, let's see it. Wow, it's fucking Battlestar Galactica, only like even greedier and even like without any charm. Okay, pass.
Even more like sudden cuts and jumpy camera and shit.
I don't like.
I hate that in modern TV, by the way.
There's a fair amount of that, but it's.
Well, no,
you have to use the this is the whole problem. You have to use the jump cuts instead of the pan shots because most of the shit is done in blue screen to save cost. If you use regular like actual sets, because people don't, for example, realize that like in a actual in like the prequels, most of the sets were actual sets that were filmed before, like with the pan shot, and then overlaid using green screen to the shots that they done with the actors. The whole thing was that to build a lot of those sets, you would have to like use humongous amount of resources, so they just built miniatures instead. And with modern shows, they don't want to use that technique, so they will do like computer generated stuff for a shot, and
I don't have a solid physical basis.
Yeah, and see, the problem is that you don't see panning shots in films no more, because it's easier for them to just film something at a certain location, reuse that shot in the green screen, because that saves costs. And in Bohemian Rhapsody, there is an infamous scene when CIA talks with Freddie Mercury about the band Queen, and the whole problem with that scene is there's fucking 50 jump cuts in it. There's not a single panning shot. There's 50 jump cuts because those fucking idiots were so cheap that they used footage from a location and then the fucking green screen behind the actors, and it's so jarring. Like, the film is okay, but just the ending is fucking garbage. And that film won an Oscar for editing.
Well, actually, fun thing I saw recently, a couple of months ago, I think. It's like, actually, I would say, an action sequence from Kamen Rider, of all things. It's like a 40-second action sequence that starts outside, goes into a building through a window with the camera, all in a single shot.
I mean, fucking look, like, Sentai series and Kamen Rider series, like, have more practical effects and more actually hard put into them than modern blockbusters. That was always the case.
Now, from that shot, what it looked like is they were using a drone to film things outside, and then someone flew the drone in, and someone just grabbed it and moved it around to film the rest or something like that.
Yeah.
Or they used some kind of wire setup, but...
They could have used the wire setup. I mean, the drone camera thing is, like, people are starting to use it. I think they've done that in a Hardcore Henry a few times for some of the scenes. Like, if you really want to see a good film with a lot of good action films, is action, like, I would really recommend it. John Wick. John Wick is a simple film with a simple premise, but it's really, like,
well executed.
Executed. It's basically the best bits of Matrix without all the bullshit. How I'm trying to be a smart film. Let's be honest, Matrix was not a smart film. It was just a flashy film with a ton of good action scenes.
Yeah. And some vaguely philosophical bits.
Yeah.
Emphasis on vaguely.
No, not liking shaky camera. No, I never liked Blair Witch Project, sorry. Blair Witch Project and Cloverfield started the whole, like, super low budget shaky cam. Because you had shaky cam in Saving Private Ryan, and that was used nicely because...
it helps indicate how much of a clusterfuck the sequence you're in is.
Well, yeah.
The confusion of the guys on the ground.
You still had that in Black Hawk Down, but that's actually, like, good cinematography.
And, like, for example, with, like, stuff like that landing scene in Saving Private Ryan, the camera work is kind of frantic, but you don't lose track of roughly what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's very important in having a good action sequence. It's one of the things from what I've seen, bits I've seen of it, that, like, the Hobbit movies fucked up.
The Hobbit films are weird to watch. I've tried.
I never watched them in cinema, and I only seen bits and pieces, like, outside the cinema.
I rewatched them recently, and I'm like, this is not good. It's the first film is okay-ish, but there's, like, a lot of weird stuff with the like with the troll sequence is really weird. It's then you have the barrel escape, and the barrel escape is fucking just why? Why is the sequence there other than, like, oh, it's for the cinema? Because there's really a lot of The Hobbit is not a long book. Let's be honest. The problem is there's not a lot of material to go with, because a lot of dwarves have little to no personality.
Yeah, like Bofur, what's his personality? He's fat!
But they tried to make a film out of it and put that, like, dwarf elven romance for no reason other than we need to have character development.
And shoehorn Legolas in there. You got to get the Orlando Bloom fangirls in there.
Oh god, that was like, why is he here? I mean, let's be honest.
It makes sense that you'd show him being there, like, at Thranduil's court, but making him, like, and maybe, like, in some action sequences, like, if you're in the Battle of the Five Armies, he's there as one of the elven leaders for some action sequences shit, that kind of stuff. That would make sense.
the Battle of the Five Armies though is like oh neat, they actually tried to make a film out of a clash of three Warhammer armies. Yay! There's Bretonia, dwarves, and fucking high elves. Yay! Well, are we gonna get the new miniatures for those? Yeah, but yeah, not exactly. I think Peter Jackson just wanted to make just the Hobbit film, and then Exec started meddling in and saying.
That's roughly what I've heard. Like, Jackson himself didn't want to put in the loads of work either, from what I've heard. He was kind of forced to pick up slack a bit.
I think he would have more fun working with Similarian and trying to make something out of it.
Well, like maybe like the Turin Turambar's story or something like that.
But The Hobbit is just like it's not really.
You can't make a movie like the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah, and I will like get a lot of flack for it, but say I did not like The Hobbit when I read it. I just
I read it after reading Lord of the Rings, and it's like it didn't fit.
Because it was more like okay, like Lord of the Rings is a history book of Middle Earth, and Hobbit is just like
a story for kids.
A story. No, it's a story that is told around a campfire. It's not this grandiose adventure that is kept in the scroll in some library. It's a story that a bard sits down and tells through like 5 nights at a bonfire.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of songs in Hobbit, the book, that were, and a lot of just glancing over events, like they boarded the eagles and they rode through this and this is the song they sang along. While in the film they actually tried to like insert some kind of a looming threat to it and like some ties to the Lord of the Rings franchise. It didn't really fit that well. Because again, like The Hobbit is except for the ending, it's a very cheerful book. It's like a lot of the tone of the first part of the book is like the heroes are almost invincible because there's always a circumstance that let them escape from the fray.
It's adventure.
And then it's like, oh, it's fucking dwarven politics.
Mogrugius.
My heritage, my 56% dwarven. God, it's so petty too. At the end, it's like, Smaug is dead. Well, we are here, so
problem solved, right? Right?
You know, the problem thing here would be like, hey, let's split the gold 50-50.
I got the gold. Fuck you.
I got the gold. Fuck you. I got mine. Fuck you. I was a big. I still am a big C.S. Lewis fan, and that is something I've heard that was for a while it goes on in fantasy. Either like you like C.S. Lewis style storytelling more, or you like Tolkien's style of storytelling more. I mean, C.S. Lewis is more organic, more like the proper storyline, but also it's ton of proto-evangelical stuff inserted into it, and it's kind of weird that basically he wrote his own versions of the Apocalypse of Saint John in a book form. But like it's really interesting to compare those two. They're not like the other.
Yeah, for a bit of contrast here in the meantime with the painting, while the wash is still drying on the gargoyle, I'm painting like using the dark metal on both the Winged Knight and the Boreal Outrider. But what I'm doing differently is like for this one I went for like a heavy dry brush thing, making it look more worn. For here I'm trying to more like actually fill it in. So I'm going for like a lighter, more clean look for the armor basically. It's still gonna be like weathered, but not quite at the level that the Winged Knight is going to have. That'll also help like distinguish them like when I have them next to each other. Although they won't be on the board at the same time because they're both mini bosses and you don't combine mini bosses in the board game. But characters would just get wrecked.
Oh, so about fantasy books, I know some people might disagree, but I actually would say that Weiss and Hickman, you know, the Dragonlance series duo, were and still are pretty good fantasy authors because basically they took an actual like RPG sessions into a book and made it interesting. The whole thing, like why Dragonlance is such a good setting for someone that is proficient with RPGs in general, is that it is in general a world that is designed for an RPG and it feels so familiar. So you will have the monsters actually like trying to talk their way out of a jam. You have everything basically, from sympathetic villains to lawful good assholes, and it's so good. But the problem with that is like Dragonlance has lost so much relevance these days that it's a relic of its time. It's a nice relic to go back to, but I don't think there's that much relevance to it these days. People wonder slaughtering nobles and other kind of.
I'm not sure if I ever told the story to you guys, but like in a campaign I ran a couple of years back, it's like a pretty high fantasy stuff, and there was one player in my group who's like he's like an amateur writer.
This is going to be good.
So yeah, various players come with various characters. His character is Minotaur Barbarian as class, the racing class, but he's a noble background.
Okay.
Okay. And he's basically like ripped off half the Game of Thrones plot in like a 4-page document for his character backstory. Because he's the youngest son of a noble house. His elder siblings have all for their coming of age they travel to like the area where the plot is going to take place. Mm-hmm. But they've been disappearing. Only one has come back, and he's come back kind of changed. Seems to like go against some things in family and stuff. And now his sister also went from his sister, who he had an incestuous relationship with, along with the sister's best friend. It's like, okay.
This is going magical realm, but okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, she's disappeared, so he's decided to like run off, even though he's not supposed to go for that yet, to try and help his sister. And he picked a noble background so he can have a retainer with him. So, of course, his sister's best friend, who he is also in a relationship with, is his retainer. So, then I got to work in, like, filling in the gaps in his backstory. So the reason why most of his siblings didn't come back is because, well, his family have secretly made a pact to protect their domain with some kind of demonic entity. And his siblings have been captured by an Order of Paladins. The one guy who did come back but seems kind of changed has decided to work with the Order of Paladins and try to find a different solution. And his retainer slash GF slash whatever also has like about as many warlock levels as the party has levels. It's like, oh, party's level 5, she's level 4 warlock basically. Except she tries to hide it. And it gets better because the party eventually starts working, not like of their own volition, for the Order of Paladins that captured the guy's siblings.
I mean, I would do too.
It's like, in the end, that character did die.
Yeah,
he's like Honor. So they were like, oh, they infiltrated the city, and they were trying to make it a sneaking mission, but they kind of got spotted by some dark elf mercenaries. And they're in some kind of throne room, and they're surrounded by like 30 elves, including spellcasters, and a very well-equipped swordswoman leader. And she gives them an option. They can swear a magically binding oath to not tell anyone of what happened here, and she's gonna like use a teleport circle to just kick them out of there, basically. Or they can fight to the death. Most of the characters in the party are like, well, okay, I'm not gonna give up my life for a reconnaissance mission. And they could tell, like, including using magic, that she was sincere about that offer, that they will legit, okay, they'd be under this magically binding oath, but that's literally all. Not him, he's like, well, I am not going to accept this, it's time to fight to the death.
I mean, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and then he proceeded to play a couple of wholly uninspiring characters.
I mean that's a good son of a character, just sticking to his principles, but
yeah.
Still, minus points for the magical realm bullshit.
Yeah.
Team man that fucking loves to play sluttish bards. But then again, that's a fucking principle of a bard. It's just sleep with everything.
The bard who doesn't is like the exception there.
My Nullbot character was basically this null that was actually like, oh god, human culture, this is so fascinating. He was like a weep for human culture, and it was so fucking great to roleplay it. Like, just going like squeaky in anticipation and stuff like that.
Human Senpai noticed me. It's just like in the stories.
It's just like in the legends. No, he was like, and the whole thing is like his he couldn't like play an instrument, he couldn't sing, so he actually danced. So his fucking dancing gear was like a fucking exotic dancer gear, and of course this was all because he misinterpreted how the dances were things. So yeah, there was like a lot of fun, but that group like died off, unfortunately.
I think of my most recent like player character that I actually played as was a wood elf druid. I think I told you about this when we were talking about with Boris a bit earlier.
Yeah.
A wood elf druid, like spellcaster druid, so no like wild shape combat thing. Old school druid, like the feral kind. Yes, cutting. Oh, what are we gonna do here? Let's check the sides. Rubbages in a bag on his hip that has a bunch of small animals in them. Grabs one to disembowel, read the entrails. Was reasonably willing to cooperate as long as they didn't ask him to do too much nice stuff. And actually, like, willing to like come up with plans and stuff. It's not like the I am brooding in the distance and I'm being so good. Just kind of brutal about handling things. Not your typical social things. It was fun to see how certain players reacted to that. Also had the bonus feature that a bunch of my spells did not require like any extra components. So like we were stuck somewhere without all our gear at the start of the campaign. But I still had access to pretty much my entire spellcasting arsenal.
Some let me guess. It's only somatic plus vocal.
There was one that needed material components. That was Thorn Whip, but he had some like old plants in his hair.
Ah.
Like, hey, I can use this. Get over here. Thorn Whip is such a fun spell. Especially if your DM lets you pull enemies off ledges with it.
Nani? Omama Moshindo.
Just taking a little tumble.
I mean, as long as they're not crippled, it's okay. if they are...
I used like there was one kind I played in a session online, I think that's where the dungeon we were crawling through was basically just Sen's Funhouse.
Oh,
and my character there also had Thorn Whip, so it's like, oh, like shooty lizard boys. It was Sen's Funhouse with Silver Knights, Silver Knight archers.
The special kind of hell for people that actually come up with this stuff. Just to let you know, guys.
It was a cup person who ran that session.
Tenko?
No, that wasn't a Tenko's campaign.
Oh.
It might have been either Mac or Detroit, I think.
Oh.
Fun thing, actually, well, but those knights are all standing next to ledges. So, hey, Thorn Whip! And it's like, oh, they're the big swinging blades that you need to skip through.
Mm-hmm.
I have, as my domain spell, I have, what the fuck was it? Dimension Door.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck's given? Nope.
Nope. Fuck that shit, I'm out.
That is an example of how sometimes you need to be aware of what kind of magic your characters have access to as a DM, so they don't just trivialize encounters. It's okay if they trivialize some encounters because that makes it feel good, like, hey, this spell is fucking useful, or I'm bringing effective stuff to the party.
Man, there's like a famous thing where DM laments that basically he prepared this humongous dungeon and all they fucking did was teleport into one room, take the magical item out and teleport back in because the idiot forgot to teleport proof the place.
Yeah, that's like a PC. Like, that's why you don't want to like plan things in too much detail. PCs are always going to find another way.
Like PCs are that special needs.
Like sometimes they're ridiculously competent, and then they can't figure out a puzzle designed for 5-year-olds.
Well, yeah. Also, they will get their head stuck in the most ridiculous places. It's mind-boggling how amazing those people are at just finding ways to get the characters fucked over on basically a flat plane.
You know, here we are adding some brighter metal dry brushing to the metal on the Silver Knight. Still gonna look pretty warm, but that's the whole point. But I don't just want to have like very dark stuff because there is going to be washes on this thing as well. And you don't want to just have a dark blob. You want You want things to look dark and grungy, but you still want details to be recognizable, which means you need a solid amount of contrast still. And that can be a bit of a tricky balance to find, also with other like miniatures where you need to paint dark color schemes. You want things to look dark, but you don't want the highlights to be too stark, but you do want them to be noticeable, and that can be a hard balance to find. Also, for example, painting black armor for sci-fi stuff.
Painting black armor is always tricky. Even in artwork,
making
the
black look good is.
Okay. Here's actually for if someone is going to like do artwork painting. Never use black as a starting point. Always use the color of the light you're in and work towards that with blacks. The problem most like artists amateur artists do is take the black and take the white and scale with that. That works only in like pure white light, and that's the most unnatural light you can get. I think for sci-fi armor, most people use very dark purple and work with that.
I've seen like, well, depends on the kind of vibe you want. You can use dark grays. It depends on the tone you want for the whole thing and what it needs to contrast with.
Mm-hmm.
Dark purple is generally a good choice. Purple tends to be a bit of a rare color in personal things, and it looks nice and cold without being ridiculously cold.
Yeah, which is another thing that you need to watch out for. It's warm factor of the colors. A lot of people don't understand that you don't really shove like warm and cool colors together, because that will make them clash a lot. So if you're using a colder blue, try to match a colder green to it. Don't use oranges and yellows with that. If you're like going for like, for example, Bretonnia Knights, I believe, there's try to actually grab a book about heraldry and see how those colors were used together, because heraldry actually figured it out, which reds and which blues go in together without clashing all too much.
The fuck's going on in there?
Welcome to the Comfy Miniature Painting stream.
Ooh.
I'm currently streaming myself painting some Dark Souls miniatures. And we're having a comfy chat on the meanwhile. Lots of talk about like art, painting, RPG discussion.
Yeah. While in another stream, I'm painting something else instead. But they really cannot hear us because I don't really know what is the policies on Picado about talking about certain topics, and I don't really want to violate it.
I do like the card game for Dark Souls. I found it.
Yeah, I haven't played
for Dark Souls.
Yeah, I haven't played that one, but I heard good things about it.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more than the miniature game.
The board game, you need to spend a lot of time, and it's like you need to be in the mindset for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those games where you also have to rely on your team to get good, otherwise the team fails.
Yeah, it's co-op where you reset if one character dies. Yeah.
Yeah, well, welcome to Kingdom Death Monster. Please enjoy your stay. It's a principle of a lot of those newer like board games is they're kind of like not holding on kicking you in the dick, which is nice for once. I think that's the whole thing, is that I think there was a little bit of backlash towards board games being a little bit too forgiving for players.
We've got a nice spectrum for that these days, I feel, in the...
Yes, this is actually pretty good.
Talk about board games, another board game I got to try a bit of recently that I quite enjoyed is, what's the name again? Fuck. It's about tile work.
Tile work?
Azul, that's it.
Azul Falcon?
Just Azul.
Azul.
I'm gonna give you guys the Board Game Geek page, because that's...
The last board game I bought was the Kickstarter for the final Sentinels of the Multiverse expansion. Have yet.
I'm still waiting for some bits from the Dark Souls board game Kickstarter.
Oh god, I thought it was all done.
No, like they've released some of the expansions, core games, some of the expansion stuff, but there's still like 2 waves left, including like the extra player characters, the armor sets thing, Iron Keep expansion.
Currently, I'm drawing like a party of 2 adventurers in a dungeon, trying to work their way in my stream. I have to go in like about 30 minutes or so, and I'll have a...
Well, that's probably what I'll be calling my stream about as well.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's Oh, speaking of like board game geek, I recently like looked at a certain board game. It's like a very old one, but it's still something to consider.
Please tell me
For
it's not
anyone...
Campaign for North Africa.
No, it's Voyage of the BSM Pandora. I remember playing it when I was young because it's a one-player board game.
You don't have too many of those.
You don't, and it's actually pretty neat if you're really into that 70s. Because let's be honest here, the whole thing is that the board game is very much 70s or 60s book sci-fi, where you lead a group of explorers surveying new worlds, and you have to actually plan your missions well, like plan your the group that you go down with. You have to take your equipment, you have to do things. It almost begs for like a computer game adaptation. I don't think there were any. But overall, it's a fun little game. It's mostly forgotten by now because, well, who is a boomer like me that remembers those kind of board games?
Meanwhile, progress on the gargoyle. Washes are still not entirely dry, so I can't do anything else on it. But from here, it's mostly like doing some detail work on the armor, making it, giving that green stuff to it. That's, I think, the biggest thing that needs to happen. And tidying up the base, but...
I think we need to get some green stuff because my old one's cried.
I'm talking about, like, coloring green, not, like, the modeling.
Yeah. Because the gargoyle has a little bit of green bits to the metal.
So I'm probably just going to carefully apply some green wash to selected areas on the metals to...
Or try to do green highlights.
Yeah, that tends to not really work, and in the art it's like...
True. It's very hard to capture that specific color, especially in metallic.
It's kind of like some kind of wash glaze effect is what I'm trying to go for, probably.
Yes, that would work nicely.
Because, for example, I have done some, like, metallic purple and the like previously. Let me see if I can... I think I have an image here somewhere that I can link in chat.
Okay. I need to basically, for this actual picture, I need to design some armor.
For example, stuff like the armor of this Stormcast warband for Warhammer Underworlds.
Oh, oh, that looks dandy.
I do like that game. I tried it once. I enjoyed it.
It's a pretty solid little game.
One thing I want to like stress here. If someone has problems with finding like reference for uniforms, armor, get the book called 1000 Uniforms. That's by Neumann and Goebel Publishing. It's pretty great because it has uniforms and armors from antique era up to the modern era, and for all of those people that really love 19th and 18th century uniforms and armor, it's a dandy reference. Especially for someone that does like quick sketches for example, like for all the world building threads on TG, because I did few people's.
Well, because the watchers are still drying on that. I'm going with a bit of a painting the cloth on this.
Actually,
Winged Knight.
give me a second. I'll see if I can. Actually find this.
And I think that the Outrider has like a little bit of cloth as well. I think we're going to go with dark blue on that as well, because I don't want it to be too bright to pop out of the rest of it, and I don't want it to be too like different from like the bluish tone that the Outrider is going to get, because I'm gonna like make these sort like a very light blue frosty kind of thing.
I wonder where I could load this off, because it's I don't know if I should put it in an image. I'll put it in an image dump, since it was done for TG after all. So someone was actually designing like a close to an early 18th century kind of a world, and you wanted like a revolutionary, so I took a little bit of inspiration from early 18th century uniforms, like a continental militia from the then British colonies in America.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. I did like to look at the how the muskets looked, so I actually did put in an actual proper wheel lock. But yeah, if someone actually works on like designing the new world, new setting, those uniform books like compendiums are really great to get some ideas going. There was a battle system, I think, called Flint Q. It was with a spelling error on purpose, but it was basically like an 18th century
Flintlock?
Flint? It was actually
or something.
Yeah, but it was in a spelling error on purpose. But it was meant to be, you know, Flintlock, but with a spelling error.
Yeah, Flintlock, but instead of CK, it's QUE or something.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. It was basically 18th century Napoleonic, like earlier Napoleonic Wars era kind of a thing, but with a fantasy vibe. So you had like elves in like Russian uniforms and all of that. It was pretty neat for a world building thing. The problem, of course, with that is how to fit firearms in a fucking RPG setting, which is always a problem.
Yeah, it depends on the desired lethality, but not every game should be Dark Heresy.
Yeah, but here's the thing that I think the idea was in one of the RPG settings or one of the books. Firearms were designed to counter magicians, not knights. Magicians, because it was easy to basically build a firearm that could just shoot a magician in the face while he's casting something. Well, which is a fair point.
Yeah, it depends on how your magic works a bit, but yeah.
Depends on how your magic works, but this is a good starting point. Like,
yeah, you can build your setting with that in mind.
Yeah, like the technology versus magic is pretty neat. Like if someone really wants to like look into how deep that can go, play Arcanum and fucking slaughter all the gnomes. The heartless bastards that would sell the mother for a sack of coins instead of doing a good deed. What was the publisher? I'll type it out. Wizard, that is...
As you can see here with this progress on this cloth here, I'm keeping the edges of the trim here. Those are probably going to be like a little bit of gold, just a little bit of pop in there. Just a dark weathered gold, because that also adds like a little bit of like the darker warmth that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that blue is very much what the blue of those Outrider armors would be without that dark overlay of everything. Because the first area of Dark Souls 3 for some reason has goes from the sunset into very dark places and then back into the sunset. I don't know why.
Maybe they're up north.
I don't know. It's a little bit weird. Stylus, why not working? Oh lord. Okay.
I like the weathered torn details on the Winged Knight's clothing, by the way.
Oh,
like...
yeah, definitely is good. There's a lot of good environmental storytelling in Dark Souls 3. But from what I've heard and what I've read, the story for Dark Souls 3 was retro. Okay, it's not working. It's something's wrong with my tablet. It's not registering anything. The story of Dark Souls 3 was changed so heavily, it's impossible to tell what the hell the story was in the first place. Because you had like these rituals you could use in the game, and they actually managed to pull them out in the network test, but for some reason, okay, it works here. But for some reason, like, they disabled everything of that. So, for example, like all of the bosses in Dark Souls 3 had a there we go. Had a very different purpose in the original draft than what they were. Like, Pontiff Salvan was meant to be the final boss, not the mid boss. That's why he's like False King Alan in so many ways, on screwing you over with fast strikes. Blind, the Nameless King, I believe. Whatever was that horrible malformed dragon thing?
Oh yeah, him.
What?
I said yeah, him. I think the Nameless King.
It might be, but the whole thing with him is he was supposed to be a dragon angel, and the whole idea was that all of those pilgrims that were shuffling back and forth that you see, they were like in the middle of the transformation into dragon angels, and those that didn't die would transform into those dragon angels. It's weird. The whole story was so weird, and in the end we got something really trivial.
Kind of generic.
From what I've heard, the story didn't really sit well with well, first of all, it was too ambitious. Then again, we heard the same song and dance with the Dark Souls 2, where the time travel story would have been a little bit too ambitious. But there's more about that time travel thing in Dark Souls 2 left than there's original story left in Dark Souls 3. Besides, Dark Souls 2 is really outstanding on the nature of fighting the inevitable, and how you can actually do something about that. In Dark Souls 3, just, I don't know, it's something about that story is just so not engaging, and it's so like such a crowd pleaser that I don't know. I couldn't really finish the game. It's like all the choices in the end feels like either a throwback to the first game or kind of like a attempt to basically like give the sense of I won the game because the flame is me. That's the use of the flame ending, which is like makes no actual sense. But you know, if you're making a crowd pleaser, don't expect anything out of it. I guess that's why Bloodborne is so well received, because it was something else instead.
Something fresh. Familiar
Something
enough,
fresh.
but still fresh.
I still think the problem with with Bloodborne is that it started like, oh yeah, I really love those legends about werewolves and in like old Victorian London, and then he like, who is this Lovecraft I keep hearing about, and then he basically
Lovecraft. Thinking about.
because there's like too many things that clash, like they're like those werewolf beasts and the whole blood aspect to it, and it's like, okay, I get it. This is like Bram Stoker. This is like all the werewolf legends from that time, and then you have Lovecraftian elements, the eyes, the inside, the old ones that just doesn't really fit that well.
Cthulhu notices your bulge. What's this?
No, cease. This is a family stream.
It's fun for the whole family.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that image. No. We already talked about incest enough today.
So you've only talked about Japan. Good.
No.
Now, one of my players going magical realm with their character backstory in D&D. And like pretentious. He actually DM'd a Savage World thing once. He was, without a doubt, the worst DM I have ever had.
Oh. What? Hold on.
Like, when your players do not... Like, first off, when you're running a session and you haven't even read the combat mechanics before you run the session. Generally not a good sign. If you're a GM, I don't expect you to know the full rulebook by heart, but admitting you've never even read the combat section of the rulebook when you're springing a combat encounter on us, not a good sign. And then when our player characters did not trust his Mary Sue DMPC, which was supposed to like tell us to go on this glorious quest, this and that, he tried to just force us to go there by using mind control on our characters without allowing a roll or anything. Why do I sound like a robot? I'm not sure why I sound like a robot.
No, you sounding fine to me.
Yeah, we're gonna make some progress on the highlighting now for this stuff. I'm deliberately trying to keep the highlights a bit like irregular and faded because like the cloth there is not supposed to be smooth, so you want to go for that kind of like worn, weathered look. And this blue is going to be darker again once I'm getting some washes and stuff on there. So I do want kind of like a bright blue to start off with. Well, not even a very bright. I could have gone for like this blue. Well, I'm using this. I don't want it too bright on this. This very light blue is probably going to be like the base for like this sword. So it's going to be like very light blue and then dry brushed with the white or something. Trying to make it give that frosted look. So I can't have like the wisps of frost around him that the thing has in the game. So we're probably going to just like frosted sword and a bit of a blue tinge on the armor is probably what for the Outriders is going to work. What type of paints? These are acrylic paints for miniature painting stuff. I've got some of it's Vallejo, both their game color and their model color range. And some of it is Citadel, so Games Workshop. I use a combination of both, depending on what I have on hand and what's available at the store when I need to buy replacements. And the downside with this piece of cloth here is that there's not a lot of like relief on there. You can see a bit there and stuff, but like this is mostly like flat-ish. So I'm going with some edge highlights there to accent it. But again, I don't, especially on this piece of cloth, as I don't want it to stand out too much compared to the rest. Also try to go for a bit of the worn stuff. So there, normally you don't want to like rub away paint with your hand, with your fingers after you've applied it. But in this case, it kind of gives me the effect that I want that faded. Just need to be careful that I don't have the still wet paint on my finger and touch the bottle somewhere else, because that would be kind of counterproductive.
I got a phone call.
I guessed about as much.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with me. I get those way too often.
You are very popular.
No, it's just work. And telemarketers. That's not popularity, that's
over
list
here
of
in the
people
Netherlands,
that would love.
you can actually put
I
your
wish-
phone number in a "don't fucking call me" like database. And telemarketers are legally prohibited from calling those numbers. You can sue them if they still do it.
Yeah, I actually told them quite a few times to fuck off. Oh,
Meanwhile, a Dutch boomer comes by my window. Might
I
have been
tried
able-
Monster.
You might have been. He doesn't have Monster, but he did have his mower, mini tractor, and he's actually a legit boomer, I believe. So.
Yeah, no,
Dad, stop! It's Saturday morning! Dad, please!
I think the correct term should be Moomer rather than Boom.
Moomer. It's kind of funny because like the actual baby boomers now are like 70-year-old really jaded fucks that always complain that you cannot really get a good. Like, what are you doing? Not getting a good job. Back in my day, I worked in a factory, I had a car, I had a house, and I had everything. You kids are just too lazy. Fucking. Yeah, because streaming art for fucking 12 hours to earn my pay is fucking lazy, yeah. Sure. Sure, Dad. It was fucking harder back when you were around. Ah. Yeah, those look dandy, Marker.
At least pleased with how they're going so far.
Yeah, I think they need to, like, all the washes need to dry off for the next step.
Yeah, for the washes, I'm thinking of going for like a blue wash on the Outrider because it'll give more of that cold look instead of just the dirty look.
Yeah, the problem is replicating that look on the Outrider.
Yeah,
Alright, I need to.
It's gonna be more of a pain in the ass on the dancer.
Yeah. Okay, I need to go do stuff. So yeah, thanks for another one of the comfy streams, and see you around.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a bit more here on the night. I'm just gonna do one more color on that, I think, and then I'll pretty much be done as well. This wash is still not entirely dry, so I can't really finish up the Gargoyle Lifer today. Might do that later in the upcoming week or something.
Alright, well,
see
you around.
So yeah, for this we're grabbing it. We're not grabbing gold to make it for the gold thing. We're using bronze actually.
Fancy.
Because that gives you like, it's a bit more warm and worn, so it works better with the Dark Souls kind of aesthetic. and you thin it, but with metallic paints you want to make damn sure not to thin them too much, because otherwise they just float in and don't cover at all, and it just looks horrible. And this way again, with a bit of thinning, you can still get the base effect of the dry brush, like popping through. There's a bit of color gradation there, although the biggest stuff of that is going to be when the wash gets applied on this. Because surprise, surprise, pretty much all these models are going to get washes at certain points. Okay, here I painted a bit too much of the bronze there, but once it's dry I'm just gonna touch it up with a little bit of the dark blue. It shouldn't be an issue. Might even be the case that, like, when I add the wash, that would just hide it already. And Scoops, you're just like seeing the last bit of the painted stream, sadly for you, but let's see. Let's grab some illustration here, see if there's any other bits here we want to like kinda give the gold treatment. Yeah, the rest of it is just like typical metal. I might want to get some kind of blood effect on the blade or something to make it stand out a bit more. Let's touch up that little mess up there. That's like, when you start painting miniatures, one of the big things is like, don't worry if you make mistakes, as long as you keep your paint thin and let it dry before you touch it up. You can just touch it up. This paint here is still wet, so I could just grab some more and... And now we've got it touched up again. Problem solved. But actually, I'm thinking that after the wash, this might be a bit too dark, the gold. So what I'm actually going to do is grab some actual polished gold color. But let me check. Did I show it properly? Yeah. Just gonna grab a little tiny bit of that. And we're going to use that on like a few spots on this to make it pop a bit more. Little trick here, if you put paint on your brush but it's a bit much, just slide off a bit like that. Because you don't want a blob of paint on your brush. Because that'll just like fuck things up. So with this I'm just going to like lightly touch on some of the raised areas. Messed up a bit again there, so we're going to touch it up in a second. Like, not even like a lot on the brush, but like just a little bit to give it that bit of extra pop. Now it looks like a little bit brighter, a bit less warm, but like it's going to get warmer again once we do a proper wash. Now for this one I might do not a brown wash and everything, maybe a black wash and everything and then a brown wash on the armor or something. Alright, I forgot a whole bunch of cloth on his shoulder. Okay. Guess we might as well fix that up. That's the classic thing with painting. Sometimes you just forget a bit that's supposed to be one certain color. It happens. You could just go back and fix that. That's why comfy painting is so comfy. Just like, you can take the time to do that kind of stuff. Yeah, because the other arm does not just has the armor, but this side has the cloth there. So we're gonna clean the brush again. Wait a little bit for this to dry a bit more. Meantime, for those who didn't see it yet, this is what I've started out working on the most here for a gargoyle. These are all minis from the Dark Souls board game. The gargoyle did a whole series of dry brushes to get it from a black through several shades of brown to up to a bone color to get to this. Then did a brown wash to tie it all together after also painting the armor bits. What still needs to be done on this one is like add some greens to the metal is the primary thing, and I need to touch up the base because it needs to be painted black except for like the cross area that's like front, back, and side arcs for game purposes. Not going for anything terribly fancy on this. Pretty much anyone could copy what I've done with this with a bit of patience and some brush control, which is... It might not go as quickly as I did it, but like a beginning painter can use these techniques. So now I'm working on the Winged Knight and the Outrider Knight. And as an example of some of the other Dark Souls stuff, we have the easiest model in this game to paint, a Titanite Demon, just painted dark metal. I used some dry brushing and some washing to give it a bit of texture. And we have Smo here. He comes along with Arnstein as well, but Arnstein is still the local gaming star because I only brought the tray of mini-boss and big boss monsters. Because everything else in my collection except for these three and the Dancer of the Boreal Valley is already painted. They're pretty nice to paint, even though one or two of the models had a bit of a bendy weapon problem. Including one of the Silver Knights who basically had like a banana sword. Yeah, let's get some of the highlights on this. Should be dry enough. Bit much there, so I can kind of rub it, which doesn't clean it as well as just touching it up with paint. But in this case, as I said earlier, I'm going for a bit of the like worn, dirty look because that tends to fit the Souls aesthetic. It's like almost like a dry brush on that bit. I'm gonna grab another natural light for myself. Ah, there's one bit there that needs a bit more work here. We have to see with like this area over here. You can see the fold there now. So this is, yeah, pretty much done now. I think we've got a good point here to close out this stream. I think there was someone blocked in right after me for streaming, so let me actually check the calendar, see who that is. Oh yes, it's Shadowborg with some Total War coming up next apparently, so... Yeah, let's see. Everyone, thank you for watching this comfy miniature painted stream.
Farewell!
Gotta put on this the minis for a second too. This is what has been worked on for this session. Pretty nice progress. Pretty pleased with it. How it's done. This is a comfy thing. Comfy thing. So, thanks for watching and see you guys on a later stream.